Perhaps a neat place to go now, since we're talking about virtual events and there's different ways of going about them, uh, would be to talk about tactics. We've had some pretty high level, sort of philosophical at times discussion. But if an advisor just thinks, yeah, but what do I actually do? Where do I start? What do I do? What's some advice there? I mean, certainly I would start with attend virtual events. That to me seems a no-brainer. That if you're interested in hosting a great one, attend a bunch and write down your feelings about, well, that one I only lasted about 5 minutes before I jumped off, and here's why. The speakers the speakers did this and they did that, and I didn't feel welcome because of this. And write all those things down, because certainly your preference is meaningful. We in these sorts of things, we actually really are all experts, because you attend something and you realize instantly you either love it or you don't, and you either stay or you don't. But to write that down and say, well, what was it that made me stay? What was it that made me leave? But Tyson, what do you think in terms of the first steps that someone should take on the road to hosting a really successful virtual event?
All right, cool. This is going to be a little bit of a three-part answer to your question, if that makes sense. And I think that if there's any three things that I could get everybody to pull from what it'll take to be a successful event producer, or at least in terms of being engaged in a successful virtual event, I think you really need to look at it from three core angles, because there's a few things to understand before I get into these angles about virtual events. One, virtual events don't give people the same level of endorphin reaction as a real in-person event. So you have to check your expectations of how a virtual event is going to make people feel, assuming that it's going to be the same thing as a regular event. It's like, and the reason why I'm bringing that up, for example, is if you're going to be hosting your own, you need to think about the broadcast. And so the broadcast component is the first of the three core elements of what it takes to host a solid virtual interactive experience. And so that broadcast element right now, it's us, it's Zoom. So that broadcast is whatever the core messaging is and what the content is. And right now, content is king. It is so important that you take the time to think about your content before you start putting it out there in a virtual event, if you're hosting it or if you're doing anything. But effectively, your broadcast is what the source material is. So that could be, a YouTube video pre-recorded. It could be something on Vimeo. It could be something on Facebook. It could be something on Twitch. It can, and understanding that broadcast platform, the one that you're most comfortable with using, the one that you would like to engage with the most, if that's the one that's going to be the most easy for you to start doing something and hosting your own types of seminars or virtual experiences, or these types of thought leadership type experiences where a lot of people with different ideas and opinions come together, or informational style sessions with engagement, you need to think about how that content is going to come across and what that content is going to be. So you need to start thinking like a broadcaster. And it's like, can I watch this for 30 minutes without changing the channel? Can I watch this for even literally 3 minutes without changing the channel? And you need to think about how quick those cuts go back and forth for your content and how you're going to manage it. So broadcast is basically, that's the content. That's what you're putting out there, the messaging. And it doesn't all have to be live. Some of it can be pre-recorded and then put together. So it's much like how, when you're doing presentation shares, it's like we've got, the demo, you've got basically like a slideshow. Instead of doing a slideshow, you can still also screen share a video. You know what I mean? You can do the exact same thing. So if you have a pre-recorded cool video message or anything that you want to put in there, you can think about how you get that content. And that's why it's really good to practice those types of pre-recorded videos, because a lot of that is, very much accepted as the norm right now. People are used to seeing people as we are, Zooming from their homes, Zooming from their phones, wherever they're available. That sense of authenticity comes with that, which I think is really nice. And people get into that as totally acceptable and refreshing. So don't feel like you need to build a big studio. But that being said, the second component of what makes a really great virtual event is that setting. It's that backdrop. And, it's what you would theoretically go as your stage design, your stage set. So if you think about your backdrop as a stage set and a stage design, how can you plan, if you're going to be hosting your own, something interesting and engaging? And if it's a thought leadership conference or it's a speaker style of event, what can you do behind you that will, one, potentially put your brand up? So is it a super clean, minimal? How is your brand represented? Is it clean and minimal? Do you just have like a logo with like your own backdrop done, custom done, and you put that as your Zoom backdrop and that's it? Or, as events get more and more complicated and more sophisticated, people are going to expect more elaborate or at least physical backdrops. You look at a lot of the politicians right now who are being interviewed, they're strategically placing bookcases behind themselves, so filled with books. They're aware of how their knickknacks look on the pieces. So all these types of things help build and play into your own brand, right? And you don't need to necessarily, create and, I'm at the stage in our agency, and what we do is we build actual full out stage set designs that people broadcast from, and we use very like high-end equipment and everything like that because our clients have the budget to do that. But philosophically, if you're not spending all the money, you can still achieve a similar effect by thinking about what your stage is going to look like, or what your broadcast center is going to look like. And that can be your living room, your home, a setting that you're comfortable in. Maybe it's a restaurant backdrop. Maybe it's a hotel space that you like. Whatever room that you are comfortable in hosting from, that's super important to think about as well if you're going to do something virtual, and how that back end also connects to the third component, which is really important, which is the interactivity. Now, the interactivity is what takes and elevates a virtual meeting to an actual event. And I think that that's something that's really important, because at events, you don't typically just walk in, you don't sit there and just listen to somebody without moving. It's the interactivity that's the component. So how are people engaging in that virtual sphere? Right now, we've got a chat room going so people can engage. If they want to ask questions, this is great. This is the type of interactivity that's required to also keep people's attention. If they're just sitting there listening to us talking, but they can't ask questions, they might not stay that long. So these chat features are really important. Now, this is a very basic level of what you would call the multiple pillars of a broadcast event. We know where we're coming from. We know what we're talking about. Our stages are set. We've got the interactivity components with the chat. That stuff is really cool. So you need to think about your content, what you're talking about, what your setting is going to look like, and what those interactive elements are going to be. And that, if you break down all of it, are the core three pillars that you need to be thinking about. You think about how people are going to be engaging at home, which is really, really important. It's like, what's their comfort level at? And what are the other elements of interactivity that you can potentially engage with them if this is planned at home that can tie into what you're doing in the broadcast, right? So you've got your broadcast center and your stage, you've got your interactivity, you've got your at-home elements if they're there. And those at-home elements can be everything from like takeout delivery dinner kits, paired wine, bottles of champagne, little gift boxes, like all these types of things that can actually be combined to create a very effective brand experience. And they're small touches. So say, for example, you're hosting an event and you want to put your own on, and you're sitting there going, I don't have a huge budget, but I want to try and reach as many people as possible. You do send out your invitation, send it all out via email, make sure you know what you're going to talk about, make sure you have a planned run of show, make sure that you have interspersed breaks like Philip's doing, so people can refresh. Make sure that you have some fun engagement aspects. Somebody tossed up there about Philip, about like door prizes and best questions, best comments. Those are all super, super good things to do, because those are elements that you can use to like keep engagement at a fun level. Because ultimately what you want to try and do is create a sense of fun and engagement and something that's memorable. Now, it's the engagement that keeps it memorable as well, right? People learn and retain more when they're doing and things and actively participating. So those types of elements are really important to think about.
Great. And I'd put that out there as well. Even if someone doesn't participate in a comment section, there's still an element of a dynamic experience by knowing that there are live questions coming in. So there's an element that you really are participating in something, or you're at the very least witnessing something that is live and dynamic and with interaction that also elevates your experience, even if you're not going to put a comment in the box. Which is absolutely fine. And I would say as well, we have 4 or 5 people right now with kind of different roles. There's the 2 of us, there's John and Philip sort of running things behind the scenes. And so an advisor might think, well, I don't have a team of 4 people and I don't really want to hire, some students or something to run things behind the scenes. And it's just me. Well, you can do cool things just with you as well. So you had mentioned, Tyson, about doing pre-recorded video. So here's an idea. You pre-record a seminar on a given topic. Throughout the pre-recorded seminar, you say things like, make sure if you have a question to put it in the chat box, and we will, we'll make sure that we address it. So at the time that you do your event, you hit play on your pre-recorded video. And while you're doing that, you are sitting there, just you, monitoring the chat box and answering questions as they come. So you need to be able to say, be sure to put your questions in the box. Now, it's a pre-recorded video. You're not going to be able to, on video, respond to the questions that haven't come in yet, of course, but you can still have that interaction. And what's great about that is that if you're doing a live video and simultaneously trying to address comments coming into the box, it can get kind of choppy. It can disrupt the flow of what you're doing because someone asks a question that you're going to get into a couple minutes later. It can create not a great experience, not a very smooth experience. But doing pre-recorded video is great. I will say though, this isn't pre-recorded. We're not pulling the wool over anyone's eyes here, but this is live. So if that comes into anyone's mind that, well, I don't have a team like they're doing today, you can still do some pretty cool things. You can still have that element of interactivity that's important.
Yeah, and I think from a pre-recorded content, I think it's also really important to know that that's not a bad thing. Mm-hmm. And I think that everybody who's listening, for the benefit of your own business and flexibility in the digital sphere, should pre-record a 1.5 minute bumper promo reel about yourself, your basics, your business. Think about if you were shooting your own 1.5 minute television commercial, or 30-second television commercial, or 1 minute long 45-second television commercial, however long you feel comfortable. If you have the time and the wherewithal, I would suggest doing a 15-second spot, a 30-second spot, a 45-second spot, a minute, and a 1.5 minutes. And the reason why is that, and you have those files pre-prepared, and this brings in and the reason why you want to do this is this becomes your digital business card that you can then basically integrate into other events. So say, because we've been talking a lot about like hosting your own virtual experience and what it takes to do that. But if you don't want to go to all the effort to host your own, or it's something that you're not comfortable with, you can still sponsor somebody else's virtual experience. And again, this brings it back to, what are some other brands that are out there, other companies that you respect, cross-pollination, look at them and go, hey, maybe I could sponsor their virtual event. It looks like they're going to have a similar demographic to the type of person that I'm going after. That would be a really great way to do it. Now, sponsorship engagement is something that a lot of people don't really understand yet in the virtual sphere because it's so new. When I first launched Candlelight Club, I had to take a pre-existing successful physical environment and then basically go, how do I bring this virtual? And then how do I bring my sponsors with me? Because the sponsor dollars can cover the costs of a lot of these virtual experiences, but there needs to be value for the sponsors in it, right? And so a lot of the things, if you're looking to sponsor something, additional to the logo placement and the thank yous and the interactive engagement, you can also go and say, hey, play my pre-recorded video. And it's something that from if you're sponsoring another event, it's just valuable to have. And it doesn't take, a lot of money to put together. It just takes a few times of practice. And, even for our, for on the scale of our events, I had a different financial company, National Bank, was a presenting partner for one of my big virtual national events. And we actually created for National Bank multiple layers of engagement, multiple rooms of interactivity, in terms of Candlelight Club. And we actually we partnered with a company out of San Francisco that's very tech progressive, that bases itself off of audio proximity. It's a whole new program, and you're going to see a whole bunch of, but the visual design features were completely customizable. So I custom graphic designed a space for National Bank. It was a pop-up art gallery. And then in that space, people could interact organically via this program. It's basically, it's a virtual event space that could hold 150 people. And we had people walking, like actually moving around, talking organically via this program. But we could engage and interact with brands and partners in there. And so National Bank not only had pre-recorded video content from this incredible art gallery that they opened, Calgary, Contemporary Calgary, which actually just opened in Calgary, that they've been building for 5 years, and it opened a week before COVID had to shut it down again, which sucks. But they had this incredible grand opening and a huge, great video content from National Bank in the opening, but they've never had a chance to use it. So we gave us the link, we embedded the link, but then we also had a personalized message from the banking team. And you could click on that video and it came up as a minute and a half going, thank you so much. We appreciate everybody staying safe. Here's what we're up to at National Bank. Here's how we're protecting your money. Here's what we're doing for charity. Here's how we're helping to socially lead from a technology standpoint. And we're progressively supporting the arts by supporting these types of events that you're experiencing right now. And something as simple as that came from the vice president of National Bank. He pre-recorded that to go inside within their virtual art gallery event space that we custom built for them. So it was National Bank branded. It was beautifully custom graphic designed. It looked like a pop-up art gallery, but when you came into the space, you click on the link and you get to actually learn, and you get to learn who's behind it and why, and watch a quick video. But a minute and a half video in that interactive event space was all that you needed, right?
Right.
And so keeping those video content components on hand are great for quick integrations into sponsorship opportunities, because a lot of these virtual events will also pop up quickly. And so you might not have the time necessarily to pre-record something in time to capitalize on a potential last minute opportunity that would come up in a new virtual event sphere, or a conference that you didn't know existed until 2 weeks ago, because all of these things are really starting to emerge now. So having that pre-recorded content for about, think of yourself as making your own commercial for what you and your branding, I think is just a valuable asset to have as a digital business card.
That's an incredible point. So even if you're not running events, those videos are hugely, hugely powerful to have. And it also, in my experience, you might think, well, what am I going to do with them or whatever? Just the practice of sitting down and recording forces you to refine your message. It's the whole idea behind an elevator pitch. It's not just that you know what to say to someone if they ask you what you do, or that you know who to align with. It's not just for everyone else, it's for you as well. So if you've been, for instance, in your business for a very long time, you may have lost touch with what originally got you into the financial services industry, just by virtue of the fact that you're in it. You're around people who know it, and recording yourself talking about something that's important enough for you that you're probably spending most of your life thinking about it and talking about it with people. So it's important to you, I hope. Just getting a video of yourself talking about that can reignite something like you wouldn't believe, and really help you to refine what your message is. And this sort of comes back to the discussion around branding as well, that if you've put some thought, and hopefully a fair bit of thought, around who you are in the space, it makes it much easier to start thinking about what are those other organizations that you're going to align with, or other causes or sponsors or things like that. And it makes your message that much more powerful when you're reaching out to them to do something together. And so again, it will hopefully be a future session somewhere where we can talk about personal branding really at length, but I think it's worth yourself and a day with a whiteboard, with maybe some people that you trust or people that you do business with to really nail that down. For sure, it really helps to smooth out everything else. So that's a great point about the videos. I'm curious if our hosts of the day, Philip and John, have any sort of burning questions that this discussion has brought to mind. Is there anything, beyond, and I know there are things that are coming in through the chat box as well, but as gentlemen in the industry, what has this brought up? Any thoughts?
Great question so far. It's something that gets talked about a ton of how do we walk the line of compliance in our industry, because it is hefty. The regulators are in our business a lot. And for good reason. We're dealing with people's life savings. But this move to virtual puts firms in a really weird position because they want to monitor everything we're saying, right? This is why we have to approve any print ad or, big email chains and that sort of stuff. So to be able to create our own little broadcast booth to start having virtual events is not the easiest thing to implement, depending on the firm you're at or the products that you're trying to put out there. Have you seen anything in that space that anyone's pushing the envelope, or how did they get this stuff implemented in a timely manner?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. First of all, thanks, John. But I think, I think the first thing to do would be ask your firm if they have a plan for it already, because there might be a template that they're currently working on that, not everybody knows about yet. A lot of big companies are at the moment realizing that they need to shift all of their big internal meetings into virtual. This is something that nobody rushed to do. I think the way when COVID first hit, because nobody really knew how long they were going to have to deal with this for. And as the summer went on, a lot of brands and big companies who were conservatively holding back on marketing spends or tourism budgets or planning, in terms of conferences and all those types of events, they're like, okay, well, we're not going to shift anything. We're not really going to change it because we don't know how long this is going to go for. Maybe it won't last that long. But now that we're into the late summer and the fall and people are realizing, yes, the second wave is a thing. Yes, there's more lockdowns coming. And now all the government officials are basically saying, along with the doctors, that are like, okay, at least through the end of 2021, people are going to be gathering in large numbers virtually. It might be till April at the very earliest before sports are even back. So you have to understand that virtual is not going away, obviously, and it's going to be something that's really important to continue to work towards. And I think that companies are realizing this. So I would expect, or at least understand, that most big companies and firms would have some sort of a plan being worked on right now from the executive office level. And if they're not, the question would be prompted to go, hey, well, why aren't you? And if you can't, and if you aren't developing, something on an overarching company-wide level of consistency, maybe you could give us some guidelines internally of how we can manage those protocols while experimenting with virtual, because we believe that this is a very valuable way to increase our potential client roster and increase the level of connectivity with our clients. And is there a protocol on how to interact? Even at the very least, is there a set template of 10 Zoom backdrops that are cool, that are pre-approved, that we can use, or an invitation template that, their internal graphic design team compartment could go, hey, you know what, hosting a virtual event, here's the graphic template and you can insert your time and links here. I think that there's ways that if you can go back to the firms and ask them and probe them about what assets they have, but also ask them the right questions, so that, because based off of what you think you're going to actually need, and go, can you deliver this for us? And if not, can I get the green light to develop it on my own based off of a pre-existing template? And I think that would be the most effective way to kind of go about doing that.
And I'll jump on that as well, Tyson. And I nodded a lot on that last point you just made, which is, how do you put yourself in a position with your compliance department? And again, this is sort of culture dependent. It depends on the culture of your company, of sort of how removed your compliance is from sort of the on the ground. But to say, if there isn't something in place already, or even if there is, but it's constantly being developed, can you volunteer to have your voice as part of those discussions and say, I'm actively researching ways that we can bring our practice more virtually, because obviously that's the way things are going, at least in the short to mid term. But even once things are all said and done, hopefully when all things are said and done, we will have so drastically changed our expectations when it comes to virtual, that when all of this blows over, virtual will still be very much a big piece, much more than it was pre-COVID. Mm-hmm. And so having that conversation with the company itself to say, I'm actively researching, not just for my own client base, my own business, but having that conversation around market share, that, look at the big box stores right now. It really is a race. Whoever does it best first will have so much more access to market share after the fact. And those that are not good at online sales, for example, are the Sears of the world, are the Targets of the world, that aren't really all that good at doing that, versus some of the other companies that are really doing well because they are seeing where things are going. And so having that conversation with the company to say, if you're having questions or having a meeting about this, I'd love to be a part of that, because every day I'm researching, I'm attending virtual events, not only in this industry, but in other industries. Tyson, you mentioned real estate. That's, if you think about sort of sister industries where you could look to and say, well, what are they doing? What are they doing that's really getting people moving and earning that market share, and putting yourself in a position to really succeed, and learning from that. And so what you said, I think, is spot on. So not only inquiring, and I would say inquire early. You might not have a plan at all right now, but I would suggest that if anyone who's watching this right now intends to do virtual events in the future, reach out now. Reach out to your compliance departments to say, this is something I'd like to start looking into doing. What's available now? Rather than waiting until you really, really like to do it. Because as was said, the turnaround time, depending on the company you belong to, it could be a bit of a wait, especially if it's something that they haven't greenlit already. And then another point on that as well is, if there is an advisor, someone at your company, doesn't matter where, it could be on the other side of the country, who has done something that looks really interesting that you wouldn't think would get an easy yes from the compliance department, reach out to that person to say, how did it go? What kind of pushback did you get? Did you get any pushback? And how did that happen? Because that will inform the way that you move forward with compliance. And finally, I would say, try not to get too dissuaded if it is a little bit of a difficult track to get there. We're all learning how to cope with this. I know, Tyson, you've already said it's cliche to say it's the new it's the new normal, but certainly the bigger, I would say, more bureaucratic places, it takes time to get the approvals needed in order to put something really cool together and actually get it out there and launch it. So be a bit patient, but at the same time, act now. I think Gary Vaynerchuk talks about that. Have patience, but be urgent. Act now and get the ball rolling, because if what we're saying here is true, that this is not going to be over in 3 months, that this is going to be a lasting thing, imagine if you start now, how much further ahead you will be in this space come a year from now, or come 18 months from now, versus a lot of other people in the space. Will you have access to more market share because you have taken the necessary steps now to become not only an expert in your subject matter, but an expert in the tools, an expert in the medium, and doing exactly what Tyson's talked about, of putting some consideration into your backdrop. I say that, and I've got pretty much nothing going on here. Look at Tyson's backdrop. It's much nicer. But think about these things, and while people might say, and it may be true, that TV is on its way out, what's not on its way out is what TV has accomplished with respect to getting people well, not engaged, but watching. So Jimmy Fallon's a great example. Jimmy Fallon, host of the Tonight Show, moved to his home to keep doing the show while at home. He's now moved back to his studio, but he's wearing his at-home clothes. So he's got the backdrop. But obviously they've had discussions that, you know, the suit and tie now isn't as relevant as it was prior. So wear your jeans and your runners and your sweater, but we're going to put you in the studio. So those things don't happen by accident. So these are worthwhile things to pay attention to and to notice and to try to apply to your own practice, to your own business and marketing efforts.
Yeah, I think that that's a really good point in terms of, you know, applying all of those tactics and considering, you know, how like the content goes. But I think one of the interesting things to do just at a base level, and, you know, it's great because we're all on Zoom right now and everybody's very familiar with that, is if you're even remotely interested in looking into virtual events or hosting your own, take some time and just, you know, maybe you're a tech inclined person, maybe you're not. If you are tech inclined, take some time to demo a few of these new platforms that are coming out. You know, if you want, I can send you a list of a couple ones that I think are really good right now. High Fidelity being one, Topia being another one, that are super cutting edge. And these might be way more than anybody that you need. But these types of immersive environments are going to become more and more and more popular. So just even learning how to use them before you get engaged, it'll probably take you, you know, a little bit of time to kind of figure it out. But the more comfortable you are in this sphere with these types of new emerging technologies, the more opportunities you're going to be able to find to utilize them to your benefit, right? And so I think ultimately people are going to be thrust into this world more so into the big, larger scale virtual events world. In this next year, you're going to see a ton of conferences that are corporate conferences that are just mandatory. You know, it's like, hey, 900 people, we got to get together. You're all joining this virtual event. You know, that's one of the elements that we're working on right now is a lot of these big companies that are shifting. I mean, these are brands and massive brands that, you know, out of the US that have $3 million event budgets. You know, it's like these big annual corporate gatherings that you would fly across to Miami for, that just can't happen anymore, right? But these people still need to gather. And a lot of these companies are going to be going, well, you're coming to that, right? They spend the money because they make it mandatory, right? And so these virtual events are going to become mandatory. So just getting used to how these platforms work is going to be just a valuable skill set, just even for your own experience, so that when you decide you want to go check out a financial or investment conference that you're not hosting, but you just want to go check it out and see what other people are doing, the more comfortable you are with that, the better you'll be able to actually secure your brand and business and take advantage of all these new marketing opportunities that are emerging, right?
And I would say that this is a very soft plug, but certainly reaching out to Tyson or myself, you know, in addition to checking out these events, but just for a question, what do you think about this? I'm thinking about that. I think that's, I would imagine, Tyson, you're open to that, having questions come into your inbox from the attendees here of what do you think?
Yeah, for sure. And I know, Christy, you just sent out a note about what were those names again, and Bill as well. But those two specific companies, they're both out of San Francisco. One is called High Fidelity. It's still in beta. It's the program that I used for Candlelight Club most recently for one of my most recent events. Very cool, very interactive. But it's still in beta, which means it's not a finalized version yet. And so therefore they're not actually, you know, they're still adding tweaks to it. And so if you go in right now, it's highly experimental, but it's just kind of cool to check out. So you can go to their website and just check it out and play around. Another one that's really cool is called Topia. Their website is topia.io. And they work off of video and audio proximity, but the way that they've graphically designed it, it actually looks like a black and white pencil sketch storybook. And you can, but it's got video embedded. So you can, and that thing can hold 5,000 people simultaneously. And as you walk up and down and move your little avatar stick through 2D stick figure guy through this immersive world, which is all custom created, you can basically click on different links that are embedded, and you can go check out like different music and go check out different types of things. And, granted, this is obviously nothing to do with the financial sphere now, but these are the types of programs that are emerging very rapidly, that a lot of virtual event producers such as my agency, or a lot of big brands like Nike and EA and a whole bunch of these other companies are shifting into these types of programs. So that the adoption rate amongst basically like 50 and under is going to be huge. And then it'll take a little bit more time for everybody else to adopt it. But these are the things that are coming down the pipe. So it's just good to know about them in general.
That's great. And I would say as well, I mean, I love that you mentioned those. I hadn't heard of the second one, so I'll definitely be checking that out. That sounds really neat. And you mentioned, these aren't, they don't have anything directly to do with the financial services industry. But what's really important to note is that consumer behavior and consumer expectations are changing across the board. And so changes in one industry affect expectations for another. And so saying that, well, no one else in my industry is doing that, so why would I bother? It's because it doesn't have anything to do with the industry. It has to do with the end customer. If they've just gone through several really amazing, interesting, dynamic online events and then come to yours, they don't care that no one else in your industry isn't doing cool things. They care if you're doing cool things. And so it's important to think about that, and also that take into account that you yourselves are consumers as well. What brings you joy? What delights you when you're online and participating in these things? Integrate those, as opposed to strictly looking at within your own industry, because I would say that certainly there are industries that are always at the cusp, always pushing and ensuring that people are really, really enjoying themselves. And I would say look to those, which again, that comes back to your personal and professional brand as well. And what fits, what sort of delivery method fits with that. There was a great line, and someone put it in the chat box if they know who said this, because I heard it on some podcast and now I can't remember who said it, but that if Nike developed a hotel, I have a pretty good idea of what that hotel would be like. I can picture it. I feel like I know what the experience would be like staying at that hotel. If Hyatt developed a running shoe, I have no idea what it would be like. I don't know what they would do with that. And that's because the Nike brand has done such a good job of establishing what they are. And so if there's any number of products that they could develop that would fit right in with their brand, because they've done such a good job of establishing it. So that's just sort of something to think about. But yes, thank you, Tyson, for bringing those two up, High Fidelity and Topia.
Yeah, and they operate differently. Again, both are still in beta, which is cool. So they're actually free to go check out, which is really neat. So they don't charge to check it out right now. I think that's going to change in the next couple of weeks. So it's definitely cool it's a good time to go check it out. But there are hundreds of these types of platforms that are going to be evolving and emerging over the next little while. So, I think that's kind of like the best way to look at it, is understanding that the virtual events world is many, many things. It's just like when you're hosting a regular event, you want to pick a venue that speaks to you, that speaks to your clientele, that makes sense. Well, these platforms effectively become your event spaces, right? They're replacing, if you're going virtual, they're replacing, what you would normally do in a conference room, or what you would normally do at a restaurant. Or at a live venue. So if you look at these different platforms, think of it as like venue hopping, and you're just kind of going, oh, what venue is the best fit for me? Right. And that's why, when you look at something like High Fidelity, that's a bird's eye view, that's got audio proximity, maybe that's something that's better for a conference type of event. But then if I want a really deep immersive experience, I'll go to something like Topia that has much more visual graphic narrative, and you weave through it. And maybe that's the way that I like to sell or speak to my clients. It's through a much more storytelling type of engagement. And I really touch base with my clients on a personal level instead of more of a quick hit, kind of volume level. So you're going to find that there's all these different styles of platforms that are currently available and are emerging that, you can best suit to your own style of how you want to present your brand and how you like to discuss your knowledge about finance. And find the one that's best for you, really, at the end of the day.